Hey, what's happening guys, Chris here, checking out another weapon from Battlefield 1's Turning Tides DLC. And this time I'll be putting the Carcano M91 Carbine under the spotlight. A fairly aggressive scout weapon that sacrifices a bit of stopping power for faster consecutive fire. The Carcano M91, which was actually just designated as the Modello 1891 in Italy, was basically a rotating bolt-action service rifle designed for use with the Italian military. The gun was chambered for a very specific cartridge designed especially for it, the rimless 6.5 by 52mm Carcano round, and its internal magazine could hold up to 6 of these bullets, loaded via M-block clips. These M-block clips were a bit different to a few of the others, as it didn't really matter which way they were loaded into the magazine, as they didn't have a particular top or bottom side, and once all of those bullets were used up, the empty clip would have simply been ejected from an opening at the base of the magazine, allowing for a new clip to be pushed back into the gun through the top of the receiver after firing off that last round. It was a quick and effective reloading procedure, though a partially full magazine couldn't be topped up with individual bullets, but this was only a minor flaw in the weapon's design. The specific carbine variant in Battlefield 1 was a more compact, lighter version of the standard M91 rifle, but still pretty much functioned in a very similar way. It featured a half-stock assembly with a shorter 17.7-inch barrel, so it wasn't really all that different to other carbine-type weapons around at the time. Though it did have its own unique bayonet, which swiveled out from underneath the barrel and then folded back under when it wasn't being used, which would have been a pretty handy addition for those close-ranged engagements. So the Carcano was first produced in 1891 and introduced into Italian military service the year later to replace the Vetterli rifle, and it had a pretty long run from there, essentially becoming Italy's go-to bolt-action rifle throughout the First World War and in many of the conflicts after. The Carcano even saw action in the Second World War in the hands of both Italian and German soldiers, with the gun having a production life spanning over 60 years. And it was made in a pretty wide variety of short and long-barreled variants, including the cavalry carbine model which you get to use in the game. The M91 rifles were standard issue for the Italian army up until 1938, when it was decided that the 6.5mm ammunition was a bit too weak, as they were used in a conflict in North Africa a few years before and just simply couldn't provide enough stopping power over range. So the Italians upgraded the Carcano's firepower with a stronger 7.35mm round, along with designing a new short Carcano model called the M38. And many of the older M91 long rifle models were actually shortened to the same length as the M38, making them easier to carry and use on the battlefield. But with World War II kicking off the year later, there just wasn't enough M38 rifles or compatible ammo around to supply the whole Italian army with, and a shift in production during wartime on this scale would have created a hell of a lot of problems. So in 1940, it was decided that these 6.5mm rifles would remain to be the primary choice for the rest of the war, and many of the M38 rifles were actually rebarreled to fire the less effective but proven 6.5mm Carcano round instead. So if you want to unlock your very own Carcano M91 Carbine, you're going to need that Turning Tides DLC first and foremost, and then you can work towards completing a couple of fairly easy assignments. The first one requires you to get 25 kills with the Gewehr M.95 Carbine, very simple one to do. And you'll also need to destroy 5 explosives, which also shouldn't really take too long. A lot of people tend to plant anti-tank mines along popular travel routes, so just keep an eye out for some on those big vehicle friendly maps. Though if you're really struggling to get this one done, just keep popping spotting flares around, and whenever you notice a mine or tripwire bomb, just lob a grenade over to blow it up and get one step closer to completing this task. But anyway, it's time for those in-game statistics, going over the weapon's power first. And I have to say, this is one of the Carcano's weakest factors, as that 6.5mm round doesn't really translate over to a lot of damage, especially when they hit targets at longer distances. The gun's going to deal a fair amount of damage up close, dishing out 85 up to the range of 19 meters, but it's going to drop down gradually over distance from here, down to just 54 damage at 91 meters and beyond. So not only does the rifle lack a one-hit kill sweet spot, but it's also got some of the lowest damage figures out of all of the scout rifles, with the Carcano's maximum damage only being slightly higher than most of the other scout rifles' minimums. In a way, it's quite similar to the Gewehr M95, being able to kill most opponents in 2 shots over all ranges, though the M95 dishes out an overall higher amount of damage, especially against targets further away, meaning it's going to kill more consistently and finish off already weakened players more reliably in just one bullet. Because the Carcano's damage drops so severely at long distances, it can often mean that a perfectly placed shot to the noggin still sometimes won't be enough to bring an opponent down, which is a huge detriment to it being an effective ranged weapon. And because of the way damage multipliers work in Battlefield 1, hitting an enemy far away in the legs, arms or lower body could bring the damage down even lower than 54, meaning it could even take up to 3 bullets to kill in some rare circumstances. So for these reasons, it's definitely more suited for close to medium range fights, as it's going to deal a stronger amount of damage and generally be more effective at taking out other players. Although the M91 doesn't really hit very hard when compared to the other bolt-action rifles, it does have a speed advantage on its side, being able to fire at 73 RPM. So a bit quicker than pretty much all of the other scout weapons, apart from the Russian 1895's trench variant. It fires 11% faster than the Gewehr M95, which might deal a bit more damage, but still won't be able to kill in 2 bullets quite as swiftly. And although the Carcano doesn't have a one-hit kill zone, because it shoots a little bit quicker than the average scout weapon, it's capable of killing in 2 bullets faster than the other bolt-action rifles, outside of their sweet spot zones, allowing for some rapid follow-up shots and some pretty quick kill times, giving you the upper hand in a one-on-one showdown with a lot of other scout players. Having a muzzle velocity of 700 meters per second is another factor which suggests that the gun might be better suited for mid-range battles, as it's got a lower bullet travel speed than a lot of the other longer range damage dealing rifles, though it's still fairly adequate for taking on players over distance, especially when compared to the likes of the Vetterli and Martini Henry. It's got a quicker velocity than the Gewehr M95 too, meaning it might seem a bit easier to use against enemies further away, down to you not having to lead moving targets quite as much. Though you'll still have to account for that bullet travel time whilst using the M91, aiming slightly in front of a target running around in the distance, as 700 meters per second still isn't exactly lightning fast, and it can be beaten by a good majority of the other rifles' muzzle velocities, making their bullet trajectories a bit easier to judge at longer ranges. When it comes to accuracy, the Carcano M91 Carbine unsurprisingly doesn't really do anything much differently to the other bolt-action rifles, as it's got a vertical recoil figure of 2 and horizontal recoil figure of 1, which is the same as pretty much all of the other scout rifles in the game, apart from the Martini Henry, which kicks upwards a lot more after each shot, having a higher vertical recoil value. Despite being a carbine variant, the Carcano doesn't actually have the same benefits as the other rifle carbine variants, which all have optical attachments along with a lower aim down sights base spread when moving, meaning they'll be a bit more precise while strafing around in ADS to get on target. Instead, the Carcano actually has more in common with the Russian 1895's trench variant, having a higher spread decrease per second, which is also kinda similar to the infantry variants. So with spread decreasing quicker after each shot, this means that consecutive shots are less likely to fly off target due to random bullet deviation, basically making them more reliable and accurate, which is a pretty useful factor considering the Carcano usually takes 2 bullets to kill most enemies. But interestingly enough, because it's similar to that trench variant, it's also got lower hipfire spread values than normal too, also like the carbine variant, which probably isn't exactly a game changer for a scout weapon, but should an enemy stray too close for comfort, then you're more likely to land a no-scope on them than you would with a lot of the other bolt-action rifles. Now, 6 rounds might not sound like a hell of a lot, as it's only 1 more bullet than most of the other scout weapons, with most generally being able to hold up to about 5. But it could still make all the difference, often allowing for an extra kill per reload. And because it usually takes 2 rounds to kill in most cases, that extra shot can come in very handy in a lot of gunfights. It's not quite as generous as the Lebel 1886 or the SMLE Mark III, which can both hold even more ammunition, though it's still higher than the average scout weapon, including the Gewehr M95, which also often requires 2 bullets to kill, meaning the Carcano is technically capable of killing more enemies with a full magazine, unless of course you're landing headshots at long range, with the M95 being able to securely kill every time you do so, unlike the Carcano. With the M91 performing clip reloads only, without the ability to top the magazine up with individual rounds, this means that, like the Gewehr M95, a partially spent clip must be ejected first before popping in a new one, which should take roughly about 4.3 seconds. But if you've got a single bullet left over, or if you completely empty the magazine, then the empty clip will be detached from the base of the gun, allowing for another one to be used, with an unused chambered round being ejected too, if you still have one left over, that is. So basically, if you've got 1 or no bullets remaining in the magazine, then a reload's only going to take about 3.3 seconds to perform, which is about a second quicker than if you were reloading with 2 or more rounds left over. It's a bit longer than the Gewehr M95's reloads, with the M95's full and tactical reloads both only taking 3 seconds. But if we compare that to the other rifles in the game, 3.3 seconds is still actually quite fast, which is going to help you out quite a lot when that magazine runs dry. But anyway, in conclusion, the Carcano M91 Carbine isn't quite as punishing as most of the other rifles, firing off those fairly weak 6.5mm rounds. It won't be able to deliver a knockout punch like most of the other scout weapons, with the gun missing a one-hit kill sweet spot zone. Plus it'll deal a considerably lower amount of damage at longer ranges, making it less reliable at finishing off weakened enemies, and even being able to kill from a perfectly placed headshot. Though its speedy rate of fire often makes up for the gun's lack of power, allowing it to kill in 2 bullets quickly and consistently over most distances, giving it a competitive edge when taking on other scout players when you're outside of their one-hit kill zones. Its muzzle velocity isn't exactly the fastest, and so you'll still need to leave moving targets further away by quite a bit, but it's still not quite as bad as some of the other rifles which are also designed for close to medium range gunfights, and it'll probably seem a tad easier to use than them for this reason, giving it a bit more versatility for longer range battles. Along with its fire rate, the gun also performs full clip reloads at a pretty nippy speed too, beating most of the other scout weapons. And with the addition of a 6th bullet, you'll be able to hold an extra round than average, which might just net you an extra kill. Because those full reloads aren't too painful to sit through, you'll be able to keep laying down the fire quickly and regularly without needing to pause for too long, making you a less vulnerable target in the process. If you're looking for a snappy rifle that can perform well with an aggressive playstyle, then the Carcano M91 might be a good choice to pick. It's less likely to kill in 1 bullet, but its faster speed allows for quicker consecutive shots, often making it a fairly reliable weapon to pick for close to medium ranged encounters nearer to all the action. So that's it for another one guys, hope you enjoyed the guide and found it useful. Hit that like button if you did, and make sure you subscribe for more weapon guides on Battlefield 1 and a bunch of other stuff too. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in our next episode.